Hello and a very warm welcome, viewers. You're watching the brand new edition of India Fights Back with your host, Kriti Mishra. The telemedicine practice guidelines released jointly by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare and Niti Aayog ensures access to medical advice so that it does not become challenging due to the social distancing norms mandated by COVID-19 outbreak. The guidelines, coupled with government's teleconsultation services, eSanjeevani and eSanjeevani OPD, have leveraged information communication technologies to enable diagnosis, treatment, and management of diseases. As per World Health Organization, telemedicine is the delivery of healthcare services where distance is a critical factor by all healthcare professionals using IT for diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of diseases, injuries, research and evaluation, and all in the interest of advancing the health of individuals and their communities. And to analyze this very crucial aspect during the ongoing pandemic and even beyond, I'm joined by very eminent guests on the panel today. Joining me on the program, Dr. Guru Iqbal Singh Jaya, Chairman cum Managing Director, AIMS2Health.com and VirtualSathi.com, and also Dr. Rajesh Malhotra, Chief from our Center COVID Facility, AIMS Delhi. Welcome to Ratsava Television or Sunset TV, gentlemen.
Thank you, Nikriti.
All right, Dr. Jaya, coming to you first. The pandemic has accelerated the adoption of digital technologies, including telemedicine. How has India leveraged this technology to provide essential medical services during COVID-19 for patients in home isolation and also otherwise?
India has leveraged this in multiple ways. So, one of which, of course, is the role of the government itself and the eSanjeevani program that you mentioned. That has been rolled out super quick in very short span of time to become a countrywide service. Beyond that, all TV channels who have started helplines have effectively provided both through TV programs and through the helplines reach to the deep interior. And many of these helplines are in local languages. We ourselves had the opportunity of doing this as AIMS to Health with Aaj Tak in Hindi. And we could see the reach of those helplines into all Hindi-speaking states and beyond in other states where Hindi speakers have migrated. So Gujarat, Karnataka are two examples that come to mind from my own experience. And we were 10 of us doing that. But most importantly, the way the telemedicine practice guidelines have been made by the Government of India, Niti Aayog, Dr. Vinod Kumar Paul in particular, and the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. The changes brought about by this are phenomenal. Overnight, people who had never used this service on WhatsApp have today become proficient users of this service. So much so that even when you do something on a 2G phone, people are smart enough to find ways to send images of prescriptions in SMS messages to be printed on some other smart device or a printer elsewhere. So a single smartphone connected to a neighborhood of 8 to 10 2G phones is enabling the practice of telemedicine where you need a video consult. So even that is possible, and a prescription can be sent directly even on a 2G phone. So this is the beauty of the telemedicine practice guidelines, that overnight in the pandemic, that has become the lifeline, and not just during the early days, also in the first surge, but critically important in the second surge. In the second surge, half the doctors themselves were affected or their near and dear ones. And as a result, they were not available to their regular patients. And that gap was filled by other doctors who were available to provide that service countrywide. So unlike any other country in the world, we have a telemedicine service which enables a doctor registered with one state medical council to practice telemedicine countrywide. So, the less I say about it, it's the results that we have seen speak for it. Of course, the challenge today has been that more than the disease, the fear of the disease is causing greater damage. So the mental health aspects have become far more important than the physical health aspects of this pandemic when it comes to health.
Absolutely, sir. And as you said, that it became a lifeline during this pandemic, more so during the second wave. But as a patient, Dr. Malhotra, how do I know whom to contact or how do I get in touch with a doctor on telemedicine?
I think what is happening is now these days, the because of the growth in IT, the details are available to all the patients who are tech savvy or can use a phone. And I don't think reaching out to a doctor is really that difficult. The patients are getting smarter; they know whom to contact. And I would also actually continue from what Dr. Jaya said just now. I think the initiative taken by government has changed it all, because before these guidelines were made, nobody knew anything about what was going to happen. There were gaps in legislation. There was no clear understanding which people had. They didn't know about the rules. So both the patients as well as the doctors were skeptical. So that has actually changed with the publication or making public of these recommendations. So I think a lot of the air has been cleared, and it is only going to go forward from here. The acceptance is rapidly increasing. As we know, more and more people are going for teleconsultation, and I see a really geometric growth in it in the days to come. And of course, the pandemic itself has done a lot of if I may say, good to the cause of telemedicine. At least there's something good which has come out of it. As long back as 30th of March last year, the AIMS had constituted a group called Contact, and we made a makeshift communication room in our guest house. And since then, we have been guiding the patients as well as healthcare workers all along. We have held EICUs where the physicians handling the ICUs have been guided about how to manage their sick patients. So I think this has been the turning point as far as the telemedicine is concerned, because with this COVID, you mentioned one aspect of it, that is the social distancing and the avoiding the risk of infection to the patient or as well as to the doctor, both. So the safety as well as everybody was scared to move out, and that way the telemedicine has actually really been a boon for the patients who would otherwise be neglected in their houses.
It has been a big boon. Otherwise, as you said, patients being neglected in their houses. But Dr. Jaya, before coming for the show, while I was researching, one of the concerns that people have, that how will the doctor really know what is wrong with me if he doesn't see me?
Now, the telemedicine practice guidelines do provide that the consultation should include a video consult. But if I talk of my own personal experience, I have found that it is surprisingly not critically important to have a visual contact with the patient. I mean, of course, from a traditional medicine perspective, a physical encounter is what is essential to developing a patient-doctor relationship as a prerequisite to doing anything, including prescribing. However, in the online environment, what I have seen is that if you are able to ask the right questions and you are able to get the responses from the patient, then you do not need a live interactive session. So the power of telemedicine does not come from video or audio. It comes from the asynchronous connection, which means I say what I say as a patient. The doctor reads it as and when he or she finds the time to read it, digests it, and comes back to me with further questions. And then if he feels that there is a disparity between what he understands and therefore the patient seems to be very sick, but the whatever information he has given or reports that he has shared don't seem to tally, that is the time when physical visual interaction becomes important. And that is sufficiently possible even on a WhatsApp video consult. So you don't need anything more sophisticated than that. And if you don't have such a phone, you are able to borrow it from a neighbor for this purpose. And even in the remote rural areas, if you are looking at 10 phones, out of them, at least one is such a phone. So even an ASHA worker today in most states is empowered with a smartphone, a basic smartphone. So given that scenario, if in the current environment, what has happened is that when things broke down in terms of shortage of beds, even in Delhi for serious patients, you were left with no option but to devise a consultation form in which you put a series of COVID-related questions as if you would do in a admitted patient in a hospital ward, but tailored to COVID. And even if you made a 3-page list of such questions, most people were able to, if they did not have a printer, note down the number of the question and reply to it in a WhatsApp message. Those who had a printer printed out and then filled the form in hand. Even smarter guys who had a mechanism to download the form, filled it online and WhatsApp the document back to you. Still smarter guys put it on Google Docs and shared the link. And daily they gave you an update which had the day of illness, the SpO2 reading, the pulse rate, and smart ones, even the respiratory rate, and on, which means temperature, blood pressure, if they were diabetics, the sugar readings 3 times a day, the medications, all in a tabular format. So this is something which even I had not envisioned, despite the fact that I was intimately involved in the creation of these guidelines as a member of the Telemedicine Society of India and as a member of the Digital Health India Association. So despite all those things, despite having had the privilege of working with both these associations, that is Telemedicine Society of India and the Digital Health India Association, and the NITI Aayog, and the Ministry of Health and Welfare, and AIIMS, even the fact that I also am a product of AIIMS New Delhi in terms of my MBBS, and I was also doing my MD Pediatrics there once upon a time. So despite all those linkages, what was not apparent to me, and despite all the reading that I had done over the years, no one had ever used it the way we ended up using, not because of I, but because of the patients. So when you learned from one smart patient, you taught to another patient, and they all picked up. So it's unbelievable that the tool of WhatsApp-based telemedicine can be so good that the patients control the data they have on their own drives, in their cloud, on Google Docs. So this is something which even I couldn't have believed that can be done till a month ago. And as a result, we have been able to almost make a kind of an ICU without any staff, which means caregivers doing everything that you would expect from a caregiver, barring their ability to give an injection. So as long as it's oral medications, they are able to do it. If you have to send a prescription, all you do is print it on your printer if you have one, and take a picture of it and send it as a WhatsApp message. So all a doctor needs is a smartphone and a printer. And the patient needs at least a 2G phone with an SMS link so that he can go and print his prescription at the nearest printer that he can have access to. And it could well be the pharmaceutical shop where he has to actually show the prescription to buy the drug. So he may not even print it. He simply sends the SMS to them and they open it on their smartphone and see what is written there, and on that basis prescribe. After all, the pharmacy doesn't keep a copy of the prescription. They don't even take a photocopy of it as they do in the West, because reimbursements are involved, so you need copies of everything. Whereas here, I mean, you can have a lot of things coming to you even without prescription when those are prescription medicines. So in a way, the negatives of the system at times have become a boon in the current pandemic environment. And there is therefore tremendous scope for innovation, what is otherwise called Jugadu innovation. But the scope of innovation in this field and the nature of telemedicine consultations that are happening by all kinds of players, and those include not just government setups. There's a plethora of private sector players and NGOs who are into telemedicine in an exceptionally big way. I have also had the privilege of being associated with a dozen odd NGOs in Delhi who are in a loose confederation. So if you give out your name to them and phone number, the word goes out. I mean, you are almost bombarded with so much that you can't deal with it. So that is the other downside of it. And if you have to deal with large numbers, then you have to be highly organized. So building systems is essential to practice of telemedicine. Record keeping is essential to the practice of telemedicine. Otherwise, you will be foul of all that the telemedicine practice guidelines stand for.
Yes.
Today we are allowed WhatsApp-based practice, but tomorrow when the personal data protection bill becomes law,
Precisely.
then there will be restrictions. Then there will be tighter scrutiny of what you do, how you keep log of whatever interactions you have with the patient. But
Precisely.
So given just the WhatsApp, it is possible to link it to a web-based portal, an advanced portal. So if people can't use the engine or the type of platform we have developed, it's too advanced for them. So they need a mechanism to integrate WhatsApp into that system. And the majority of doctors also do not have the ability to use a modern system, I mean, in my age group. So, which means they also are WhatsApp based. But integrating WhatsApp with a modern system is the way to go. And that's what AIIMS 2Health and Virtual Sati are all about.
Dr. Jaya, that's a very, very important point that you're making about data. And of course, as you mentioned, records, that's a very important point. Let me take that to Dr. Malhotra. Dr. Malhotra, how would the patient be assured that the privacy is not breached by teleconsultation? Of course, as Dr. Jaya mentioned, that we'll soon have the data protection law in the country. But before that, how would the patient be assured?
So I think the onus is on the physician, as long as he can prove that the data breach did not occur at his end, occurred with the service provider or from the patient's end. Otherwise, whatever information is with the registered medical practitioner, it is his duty to make sure, just like it is for a physical consultation, that you are supposed to respect the privacy of the patient. And if that is breached, it's as much punishable under the law as it is for in person. But I would also like to just quickly say something else about what you just raised about patients saying, how will doctor come to know what I'm suffering from? So there are a few things. The whole spirit of telemedicine is when there's a distance or some constraint that there can be no in-person consultation. So if there is a in-person consultation possible, then the RMP or the practitioner cannot insist on teleconsultation. That's number one. So the patient can ask for in-person and say, I don't want a teleconsultation. Second thing is that when it is not possible, like it happened during the pandemic. So we had our website, so Department of Orthopedics. So anybody who wanted a teleconsultation had to book a slot. So the patients have to get onto the website of AIIMS and get a slot. And believe me, there was a big rush for that because we could do as many. So patients who are going for teleconsultations, they know that it's not possible to have in-person consultation. That's number one. Number two is that the physician himself has this privilege that if he thinks that an in-person consultation is important, everything may not always be possible. If you want to examine whether the liver is enlarged, spleen is enlarged, or whatever you want to know, then he can tell that this is where the teleconsultation stops and I need to examine you. So that thing is there. So as long as teleconsultation is going on, it is understood that the physician understands that he can manage this without in-person consultation. The third thing, which also Dr. Jaya briefly mentioned, I think is the technology. Now you have people who are in big cities with smartphones, even have these smartwatches, so they can record their ECG and send. So a big role goes for the technology. Like you can send your blood pressure reading, you can send your SpO2. He mentioned, pulse oximeters are available during the pandemic with everyone. So similarly, the ECG can be sent. So I think the great potential lies in future about the data which can be transmitted about other vital parameters, which will be possible to record at home and send in real time or in asynchronous time. But then, like you said, where it all started, it is absolutely mandatory to make sure that the data is protected and is not breached.
Absolutely, sir. The data has to be protected and not breached.
If I may add, Niti, a couple
Yes,
of
Dr. Jaya,
points.
please go ahead.
See, the challenge of physical examination definitely comes about, and what we have been doing so far, which is in consonance with what the telemedicine practice guidelines provide, that you have a neighborhood doctor come and examine the patient, particularly after the patient has become, a COVID patient has become RT-PCR negative. It's much easier to then get a doctor to come and sometimes take the patient to the doctor if they are not too sick. So that physical examination also happens, and at times the patient goes to more than one doctor, different specialists. So the role of the family physician or the general practitioner has become critical to the practice of telemedicine, which is the way it should have otherwise been. Indians end up going straight to specialists without going through the gatekeeper, that is the general physician or the family physician or the family practitioner. Telemedicine is enabling this to change in a faster way. So what has been happening in my own experience is that a patient could even end up in the ICU, and I'm still linked to the patient and the ICU because of telemedicine, all on WhatsApp. They create a small group. So the ICU doctor, the patient, and the caregivers and I are part of the same group. So I'm communicating with half a dozen people in a group, including the ICU doctor. So I'm able to update him on all the relevant information without his having to ask anybody, because I have information in digital form which is summarized so well that you can't have that kind of summary even in a hospital setting if you are doing it on paper. And this you are doing with ICUs in sitting in Delhi, in Ahmedabad, in Jamshedpur, in Chennai. This is from my own experience, and of course within Delhi or NCR region. So that is the power of the telemedicine practice guidelines if used sensibly. So what is between your 2 ears is probably more important than what you see with your eyes or feel with your hands. That's one of the key points I would people to understand. Yes, and the asynchronicity of it is the real power behind telemedicine, and not video consults or telephone consults.
And as you said, that there is massive potential, and of course we have to use innovations. And as we are talking about innovations, Dr. Malhotra, how do we expand it extensively in rural areas, in remote areas?
So that is where one of the strengths of telemedicine lies. We have a big IT infrastructure, and where our health infrastructure is falling short, this has the potential to bridge that gap and make sure that, what is the WHO theme for year 2021, that it should be, the fair and equitable healthcare facility all across. And I think reach to the rural area is one big advantage of telemedicine. So that is one. And actually, in the same vein in which Dr. Jaya said that a next door physician coming and interpreting everything and understanding and passing it on to the patient, the eSanjeevani AB Health and Wellness Center at HWC is actually a model on the similar lines, where more than 150,000 health and wellness center in the country have the potential to for a person in a metro city connecting with a rural health and or a peripheral health and wellness center, and actually really talking to somebody who can just carry on the instructions. So for example, he said short of giving injection. So he's somebody who can actually even give an injection because he's a healthcare worker posted there. So I think the big advantage of a big IT sector, our infrastructure in the information technology, making it possible now, everybody, even in the rural area, they have got networks, they have got smartphones. So all that you need is to put the system in place, and that is now not even putting in place, it's now expanding it to the remotest corner. The system is already in place. So while the bigger centers can have the benefits of ICU care being managed by distant intensivists and physicians, the peripheral ones can be given the even the most basic advice about everything. And I think that's where the real benefit lies, because what we are talking about, big cities only restricted to pandemic. But if we are beyond the pandemic, then telemedicine, when people are not scared of coming to AIIMS for outpatient, there will be no difficulty for them. No need for them to go to the AIIMS website and take a consultation slot for teleconsultation. But the advantage to the underprivileged and deprived and in the peripheral areas is something which I think is the real benefit, which is going to be lasting and will be the real boon for the healthcare for the rural areas.
Real boon for the rural areas and, of course, for the entire country. Dr. Jaya, I have last 60 seconds on the show. So, bridging the healthcare gap using telemedicine, the future, and as Dr. Malhotra said, beyond the pandemic. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I think the new normal for most things thereafter should be telemedicine. Even a hospital like AIIMS New Delhi and every AIIMS around the country should have its front end through telemedicine for any OPD consults. Things that cannot be done on telemedicine alone should end up in a physical visit to the facility. And of course, there is a very, very large number of things which cannot be done through telemedicine today. So while on one side, we are having what are known as Internet of Medical Things in the context of cyber physical systems at the cutting edge, where you have all kinds of gadgets integrated in a virtual environment. Therefore, our real-time data collection is happening and monitoring the health of a person, or remote ICU monitoring systems, which are a live reality in some advanced countries, but still a very, very distant dream for India. In our current environment, the scope of telemedicine, given the way the telemedicine practice guidelines have been created, is in a way taking us much faster on this journey. We are leapfrogging even the US, which is still splintered state by state telemedicine licensing practices, even in the telemedicine sphere.
Right.
So we should not go back and do what the US is saddled with historically. We should build further on what we have, because ultimately we had one Medical Council of India replaced by the National Medical Commission. Even in India, in telemedicine, apart from Telemedicine Society of India and Digital Health India Association, the third major pillar, if I may say so, is what is the Sathi, which
Yes.
is again into health informatics. That's an NGO which has done excellent work, research-based work, project-based work in telemedicine over the last 20 years. In fact, as a registered society, it has existed longer than the Telemedicine Society of India, but relatively speaking has functioned under the radar. And DHIA, Digital Health India Association, is the new incarnation of an old setup and therefore is seen to be very, very young. But all these three are highly professional entities with diverse representation of the public sector, private sector, civil society, and the private practitioners. And all three of them are playing an exceptionally good role. So even when it comes to rural areas and rural things, the virtual Sathi is enabling Sathi through its EHR systems to be licensed at pittance to NGOs in rural areas to run their own local area network-based telemedicine practices. And that is happening, for example, in Bilaspur in Madhya Pradesh already. It was earlier happening through licensing that package of services to doctors in the city over the last 15, 20 years. And some of these very, very senior doctors who are in their 70s and 80s, Dr. Ray and Malviya in particular, a well-known rheumatologist in the country, an international celebrity, has been using that system exceptionally well for over a decade now, where he's able to see, instead of 30 patients, 70 to 80 patients in those 3-4 hours, and yet churn out 7-page long prescriptions with all kinds of details, including a rare medicine, where to buy it from, and if that shop and number is not there, then which is the alternate option for it.
All right, Dr. Malhotra, closing comments from you, sir.
Yeah, so like Dr. Jaya said, that the telemedicine can also be used to decongest the secondary hospitals and the referral centers. So that is another use for it. So if you see, this no aspect of medical care which is untouched by the telemedicine, whether it's the primary care or the more specialized care in the ICU. And I think the in a futuristic way, the telemedicine is going to be an integral part of the healthcare, and it's going to fast occupy a greater proportion. So I'm looking forward to a brighter healthcare system in India, propped up by telemedicine and good physicians and competent
All right, so
professionals.
telemedicine is going to be a very integral part of India's health system going beyond the pandemic as well. On that note, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Jaya and Dr. Malhotra. Well, viewers, that's all we had for you in this edition of India Fights Back. But before that, let me remind you once again to stay safe from the coronavirus pandemic. Remember to wear a face mask and wash your hands and face regularly, and ensure that you maintain physical distancing whenever you're stepping outside. These simple precautions are all it takes to defeat the pandemic. Take good care and goodbye.